I'm Jason Horsch, owner of Xanadu Gallery in Scottsdale and Pinetop, Arizona. This is a moment in art history where we look at great works of art, share their stories, talk about their impact, and I give you my reaction to the work. Today's painting is The Scream by Norwegian painter Edvard Munch. The Scream has to be one of the world's most recognizable paintings. First created in 1893, Edvard Munch actually crafted several different versions of this work over the following years in oil, pastel, tempera, and as a lithograph. In recalling the genesis of the piece, Munch said that he'd been out for a walk at sunset when suddenly the setting sunlight turned the clouds a blood red. He sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. Munch's life primed him to create this iconic painting. Born in 1863 in Adelsbruck, Norway, Munch's childhood was difficult. Munch was frequently ill, and his early life was filled with sorrow. When Munch was only 5, he lost his mother to tuberculosis, and in his adolescence, his favorite sister, Joanne Sophie, to illness. Munch was raised by his father and an aunt. The artist would later write, "My father was temperamentally nervous and obsessively religious, to the point of psychoneurosis. From him, I inherited the seeds of madness. The angels of fear, sorrow, and death stood by my side since the day I was born." In 1879, at the age of 16, Munch enrolled in a technical college to study engineering. He excelled in physics, chemistry, and math. But much to his father's disappointment, he left the school after only a year, determined to become a painter. In 1881, Munch enrolled in the Royal School of Art and Design in Kristiania, the city later renamed Oslo. Munch explored a number of styles while studying at the school, including Impressionism and Naturalism. His early work brought criticism in the press and constant rebukes from his father. As his studies progressed, Munch became more and more interested in the human form, and soon his work focused almost exclusively on the figure. Though we know from his sketches that the artist painted a number of nudes, only one, his standing nude, survives. There is speculation that his father, an avowed pietist, may have confiscated the rest. We do know that Munch's father destroyed at least one of Munch's paintings, likely a nude, and eventually he refused to advance Munch money for art supplies. After exploring Impressionism, Munch rejected it, feeling that the style didn't allow sufficient expression. In 1889, Munch traveled to Paris during the Exposition Universelle. He roomed with fellow Norwegian artists, and his painting, Morning, was displayed in the Norwegian pavilion. At the exposition, Munch saw works by Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh, and Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, artists that would have a large impact on Munch's work. In December of that same year, Munch's father died, leaving the family destitute. Munch returned home and secured a loan from a wealthy collector to help tide the family over. But his father's death left Munch depressed and suicidal. In 1892, Munch traveled to Berlin, where he'd been invited to exhibit his work. The exhibition sparked controversy, but while staying in Berlin, Munch became involved in an international circle of writers, artists, and critics. He sold little during this period, but he made a little money charging the public fees to view a collection of his controversial works. In 1893, Munch created his first version of The Scream. Munch described his inspiration for The Scream. "I was walking along the road with 2 friends," he later wrote. "The sun was setting. Suddenly the sky turned blood red. I paused, feeling exhausted, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and tongues of fire above the blue-black fjord and the city. My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature." Understanding the difficulties, self-doubt, and anguish Munch experienced in his youth and on into his adult life as an artist has brought me a new appreciation for The Scream. While there is certainly a universal resonance in this piece, one can appreciate that the piece was also a highly personal expression of the accumulated anguish Munch had experienced in his life. Scholars believe they may have located the exact spot where Munch was walking when he experienced the sunset, a fjord overlooking Oslo. And they further suggested that the red sky might have been caused by a volcanic eruption, or that the artist may have experienced heightened sensitivity due to the recent commitment of his sister to a nearby lunatic asylum. In 1978, the Munch scholar Robert Rosenblum suggested that the strange, sexless creature in the foreground of the painting was inspired by a Peruvian mummy, which Munch could have seen at the 1889 exposition in Paris. This mummy, which was buried in a fetal position with its hands alongside its face, bears a striking resemblance to the painting. Munch's painting has resonated over the years. The 1895 pastel on board version of the work, owned by a Norwegian businessman, Peter Olsen, sold at Sotheby's in London for a record price of nearly $120 million in the May 2012 auction. Sotheby's said the work was the most colorful and vibrant of the 4 versions painted by Munch, and the only version whose frame was hand-painted by the artist to include his poem detailing the work's inspiration. I'm a pretty positive, upbeat person by nature, and yet I can still identify with the scream. Anguish and dread were prevalent in Munch's life, but they're universal emotions. I'm recording this video in the summer of 2020 in the midst of pandemic, lockdowns, and political upheaval. If there was ever a painting that could serve as a poster for an age, this one seems like it could be ours. Later in life, Munch would suffer a mental breakdown, which he described as verging on madness. Subject to hallucinations and feelings of persecution, he entered a clinic and received therapy. His doctor advised Munch to avoid drinking and fighting, which had become endemic in the artist's later life. Munch died at the age of 80 in 1844 during the German occupation of Norway. As an artist, he had succeeded in creating works that would, along with Gauguin, Van Gogh, and others, usher in a new period of expressionism in art. Unlike Van Gogh, Munch achieved fame and growing wealth as his work became more accepted, both at home in Norway and abroad. While Munch created a number of magnificent and significant paintings during his lifetime, none would resonate in the same global way that the Scream has. I would love to hear your impressions of the Scream. How do you feel about this painting? Have you seen one of the versions Munch created in person? What impact has it had on you? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining me for another moment in art history. If you enjoyed this bit of art history, be sure and subscribe so that you'll be notified about future art history videos. I look forward to seeing you in the next moment in art history.